Hey guys, Oham here. I'm going to be doing a controls guide, I guess, for longsword. And I might do a couple other weapons just so I don't have to make individual, 14 parters for this whole thing. Somebody asked for me to do longsword. I haven't used longsword since Monster Hunter Tri for the Wii. I was using a Wiimote. Yeah, there's a lot of changes in terms of what attacks you can do, so I'm going to try to do my best with this one. Create a new profile, longsword. Movements, all going to be the same. For guard, special weapon attack, I actually wouldn't be opposed this time if you kept it to R. The first side mouse button, I was swapping around with it and playing with it, and it's a little bit more time sensitive in terms of like how you can combo like your special sheath. If you're more accustomed to using R in games like Monster Hunter Wilds, where they automatically bind that to like wire bugs for like perfect guards and stuff and special attacks, in all my other tutorials, I do it this way. I noticed something else that might actually prove to be a little bit more helpful than the Alt button for focus mode. So what I would actually do maybe this time around is delete the Alt, press once thing. Toggling sucks in every game. And I would actually bind the focus hold button while weapon sheathed to the second side mouse button. And you might want to apply this to every weapon. I know in my other videos so far I've listed Alt for it. But the reason for that is just because I found out it was a lot more convenient to also have a very important control in Monster Hunter Wilds to be binded to the mouse as well. You pretty much have 5 buttons right now that are all binded. All you need is like 3 fingers on your right hand in order to perform 5 attacks-ish, or 5 controls. Middle mouse button, right click, left click, and the 2 side mouse button. They're really trying to push focus mode, so that's why this is just super important. So the second side mouse button, and it's also a non-toggle, so you could just let go, focus, let go. I don't know why it's pushing me to the side when I do this. Shift, I would say shift is a decent one for focus strike so far. Unless I could find something different, I will, I guess, let you know. I would actually recommend, if you want, you can make the secondary R. Or you could just swap that around. It hardly makes a difference because you're able to use both of them. So you could set this to R and this to the first side mouse button, and it won't make a difference to like how you control your sword. For simultaneous actions, there is an RT and A button. The crouch and evade button is A, which, like I said before, the time sensitivity will probably make you dodge more than you want to sheath in certain circumstances if you're not well accustomed to it yet. So this might be an exception to the rule that I don't like to use simultaneous actions. What you might want to do, you might want to bind the simultaneous action for RT plus A, which I guess in this case is guard and evade. I guess you're combining guard and evade with your first side mouse button. So that way you perform one attack that just binds the sheath. So you don't have to worry about combining 2 buttons at the same time. Overhead slash, first side mouse button to special sheath. Either I'm a big idiot, or it seems that if I bind these to that, it gives you the same attack, which is the spirit thrust. So it's possible that you don't actually need one of these to be present. The sheathing seems to be pretty important, I'd say, over others, but it's up to you to determine that. Again, it's your playstyle, play the game how you want. So unfortunately, it seems like R might have to be a contender here in terms of how to use the longsword properly, because it seems like the longsword does have its own set of like really weird controls that it might have more controls than like a Gunlance or a Charge Blade. I could be wrong on that, but it seems like there's very intricate moves that usually end up being part of a huger combo or a bigger combo. So I'd say R for guard and special weapon, and I'd say first side mouse button for RT plus A, which is essentially just the sheathing attack. Again, finick with these other ones if you want. This one and this one are both the same in terms of giving you the spirit thrust attack. Now, I don't know if there's a hidden longsword attack that utilizes all of 3 of these at once, or if this is just in the controls because Capcom didn't care enough to remove it if it doesn't apply. Without bum rushing you with too many of the simultaneous action stuff, it seems like in terms of longsword, simultaneous action seems to be maybe more recommended. So if you do have more buttons you want to try to bind them to, be my guest. But for me, this seems to be comfortable, probably hitting decent enough combos. Like I said, for the focus mode now, I recommend the second side mouse button. I didn't know what to do with that in the previous videos, but I think this is really good as a form of, this is bind it to your mouse, you pretty much have 5 buttons right now that are binded to your mouse. This is what the first side mouse button looks like if you bind it to Y plus B, which is the normal and special attack. This is essentially a super easy attack you can do by just clicking both of the mice button at once. I think RT plus A is honestly your best bet. I will attempt to use another weapon and try to show you how those work. Give me a sec. We're going to try to do dual blades this time. My quick fiddling around with it, I've noticed that there's not a whole lot of controls for it, so this one might be a bit easier, honestly. When you use it, go to dual blades. Everything else fine. Simultaneous action being the first side mouse button. I was hesitant on that. Also for press 1 to get rid of alt. We don't like alt. Second side mouse button for focus mode, I've noticed is pretty good. Slinger stuff seems pretty fine. As you can see in the top right, the controls are very lacking in terms of the amount. And I guess it really shines obviously in demon mode. You press R. I'd say this one's pretty easy. Keyboard configurations, leave guard and special weapon action to R. If you really don't like that, if you really don't like R, I've said R is pretty shitty in a few weapons. You could delete that, delete this, make it the first side mouse button. Let's do that. And now demon mode is the first side mouse button. So it's a lot closer. You don't have to worry about your left finger pressing the R key, which to some people might actually fuck you up pretty bad. Now, if you wanted to, set the guard to R, and set one of these to the first side mouse button. Now with the longsword, it seemed like only one option was actually really worthwhile. The issue that arises with making the first side mouse button RT plus YB is that if you spam it, you can just only do Demon Flurry move 1 it seems, and then you immediately go back out of demon mode of moves in terms of stuff for the dual blade. So you can finick around with it. Let's try RT plus B. So we'll do a move, press first side mouse button. So with this one, it seems like you could do a different attack real quick while you're in demon mode, but immediately you go back out of it. I wouldn't say simultaneous actions for dual blades are actually worth it. So it seems like for the hunting horn, probably use a lot of stuff that is binded with simultaneous actions, honestly. The hunting horn has actually a crazy amount of combo moves. When I tried using the first side mouse button within this simultaneous action, it didn't seem to really be doing anything. So it seems like you can go a couple different directions if you want. With the most minimal keys possible. R would be pretty good for the guard special weapon action, actually. It seems like in this test, it did nothing. In this one, it really did nothing. These two, it did the same thing, which is the perform key. So if you really didn't want to use R, if you didn't want to press R, you can bind R plus Y or R plus B to these, and it would essentially do the same thing, which would be performing the notes mid-combo. The special one, it would be RT plus A, and this apparently creates an echo bubble. I guess this is a new thing in Wilds. I don't remember being able to activate this in World, but you could activate it to that if that's something you want to do in order to make an easy buff. Press first side mouse button, echo bubble, increase the little echo bubble. For this one, I don't think it's worth it because you're just essentially doing the overhead slash or smash, which is really easy to do if you just press both of these at the same time. Yeah, 2 different directions. Echo bubble button, encore button if you really hate the thought of pressing R to do perform. For the light bowgun, it actually seems pretty straightforward as well. So they give you different controls for this one since it's a ranged weapon and it's a gun. You're going to want to train yourself to do focus mode for your second side mouse button, honestly. Really forgiving in terms of to make it feel like an actual gun in maybe an FPS game. R is for reload, which is just perfect. Right click is to aim down your sights, so to speak. As much as you can in a third-person game. F is to switch your modes for your gun, so if you want to switch from normal ammo to a different type of shot, you could. Now one thing you're going to want to remember to do is that the side mouse button and the aim button are very similar. They aim at the exact same distance. You can aim down the sights and it seems to act the same as focus mode. Honestly, you might not even need to use the second side mouse button focus mode. It seems like they already complement that by just aiming down the sights regularly with right click. Just to test that out real quick for you, make a wound. So I'm using the right click button right now to aim down the sights. I'm not using this focus mode specific one, which is the second side mouse button. So it says it actually gives me the option to do a focus blast. So let's press shift. And it destroys the wound. What's neat is that the first side mouse button is actually binded to your little wyvern blast, I think it's called. which is, yeah, the Wyvern Blast, which in World you were able to make 3 at the same time. It seems you're only able to make 1. So I would recommend spamming the R button because it looks like you're jacking your shit. As far as range weapon goes, it seems pretty similar to the light bowgun in terms of what to change and what not to change. They seem to be pretty smart with this one in terms of what they want certain buttons to be to compensate for multiple. I honestly don't see a whole lot wrong with this one. This is pretty similar to the light bowgun in terms of F to switch modes. The only difference for this focus strike, it seems, is that you're going to have to hold down the shift button, which is naturally the focus strike button, in order to achieve the focus strike, because I will show you when I make a wound and I just tap the shift button, it doesn't do it. It does wound damage, but you have to hold it. Maybe a second longer for it to actually be achieved. This is essentially one that seems to combine multiple different buttons. You'd have to hold one and then press another to activate a different move. For the Dragon Piercer, it seems they already binded it to your first side mouse button, which is honestly what I was going to do already, but it seems like they're smart enough on that one. You just press one button and it does that. So if you're trying to figure out the item bar, you have to hold control and do scroll wheel in order to access the item bar instead. That is a burden with range weapons, it seems. Most of your special attacks come from just holding down the aim button, and it seems like the focus mode and the aim button are the same as the light bowgun. They both do the same thing, so you honestly only need to use one, and I would just honestly recommend the right click for that. In terms of the heavy bowgun, it seems pretty straightforward. In terms of the other ranged weapons, everything seems pretty good by default. I honestly wouldn't change either anything or very little about it. The only difference here is that, so I'm aiming down the sights, pressing the first side mouse button, and it makes the guard. I'm not aiming down the sights and I press it, I still guard. I wouldn't change anything about this one. Seems pretty straightforward compared to the other ranged weapons. So the insect glaive is normally a pretty complicated weapon. What I would actually change about it is the special weapon attack is actually just like the insect, like sending it out and making it do stuff. The crouch and evade button plus the special attack button in the default settings, that makes you vault, and I know vaulting is pretty important in terms of mobility for the insect glaive and maybe dodging and preferably like air attacks and just cool combos and shit, right? What I would do is I would take this off. I would take this off the simultaneous action because again, you can just press these at the same time. You can press these like a second apart, honestly, it feels like, and you'll still get the attack. What you'd want to do, I'd say, RT plus A, make that the first side mouse button. So in your combo, when you're just attacking, you know, being a nuisance, press the first side mouse button, and then you'll just be fucking evading like crazy, right? The combos seem to work well together anyways. You can still do a lot of cool shit. Now, if you still wanted to vault, you would have to hold R to aim your Kinsect and then press space. So the option is still there to do R plus space to vault. I would say though, if you're mid combo, I would highly recommend just slashing, being an asshole, and then pressing the side mouse button. If your recovery animation is a little too long and you know you're gonna get hit, probably go leap up in the air, do a mid-air evade, something like that. It's gonna be a long ass video. I'm gonna try to shorten it as much as possible because I hate tutorials that go on for way too long and ramble about useless shit. I'm trying to make it all important information. The insect glaive I would leave as this. Normal attack R to aim the Kinsect. Get rid of alt again. Don't want alt to just be in your muscle memory. R seems to be a lot more important in certain weapons than others, I'd say. So for the Switchaxe, I'm not necessarily mad at the default settings they chose, but Switchaxe has a lot of controls now. What I would do is that, well, first off, you have a couple options here. This is what seems to be working fine in terms of combos. Now, if you really didn't want the R, again, you can always do the first side mouse button for the guard special weapon attack, and that would make it so that the first side mouse button is the morph instead of R. Not only this, but you can spam the first side mouse button to switch between morph slash modes and, you know, sword and axe mode. What I used to love about the Switchaxe is that you could just spam right click, swing it as much as you want until your stamina gets close to depleting, and then you press what makes it morph, and then you do a crazy roundabout attack and you switches into a morph. I think Elemental Discharge is still a pretty good safe bet in terms of high amounts of damage, as well as you can stick to the monster and do it if you hit them head on with it. What unfortunately makes this combo seem to be really annoying is that if you were to use these settings, you'd have a really annoying time because you'd always have to press all of these at the same time in order to do the unbridled slash attack. So if you really wanted to, if you didn't want to do that every single time you want to do the unbridled slash attack when you go into sword mode, R is a safe bet, and then the first side mouse button over here. That way, you can just smack them up, press R, and then just press the first side mouse button to do all three of those attacks at once. Seems to be a pretty powerful attack, as well as the elemental discharge attack still being able to be used. I would recommend that. Everything else feels a little bit situational and maybe personal, but in terms of like decent damage output for the Switchaxe, I would say do that. Everything else seems to just lead into like maybe an overhead or just some strong axe attack or something. I don't think that's too worth it. The sword mode is always just a good bet for high damage output. You wouldn't want to make your first side mouse button this, as it's literally just axe side slashes. Now, if you were in sword mode, they'd be a lot different, but in terms of damage output, this hardly does much. I'd say this is your best bet right here. This is elemental discharge right here. I'd say it's not worth it. Again, these suffice. Depending on the axe or sword mode, they seem to be just basic attacks, either overheads or like rising slashes. They do a decent amount of damage, I guess, but they're nowhere near the amount as like elemental discharging or the other new attacks that deal way more. Unbridled Slash seems to be a pretty decent damage dealer and also seems to switch to axe mode pretty well. The lance is pretty similar to the Gunlance and the charge blade in terms of charging, simply because they have a huge ass shield, and it makes it just a lot easier to combo guard attack oriented moves with other stuff. First off, you already know the deal. I got rid of R for the guard. Now, I guess what you could do is that if you really don't want to do all those combinations up at the top right, you could bind the guard to R, and you could set the side mouse button to one of the ones that contain 3 or more inputs. Pretty straightforward stuff. You do a little jab. If you play Gunlance, a lot of this regular lance stuff might come familiar to you. Honestly, for the dash attack, if you're already guarding, this is similar to the Wyvern Fire ability with the regular lance. You simply guard, and then you tap both the left and right click in order to perform your special kind of high damage dealing attack of sorts, which in this case is a dash attack. I'm not going to explain every single move set for every single weapon, but I just want to showcase you how you can implement the guard fairly easy into pretty much all attacks around the board. You're going to be wanting to do a guard attack of sorts, maybe a dash, maybe a power guard into a payback thrust or a mid thrust, something like that. If you really wanted to make this R, and I would bind this to the first mouse button. That way you do the dash attack, and you can also do a plethora of other little things in between. What might make this a little tricky, however, is if you're planning on putting it into a combo move, it might not work out the way you'd expect. Let's say I do a thrust or something, and I tap the first side mouse button, which I bind it to technically dash attack. So jab, and then I spam it. Now you're guarding, but you're doing a leaping thrust instead of the dash attack. So I think the inputs are a little weird on like what it's trying to detect as what move you're trying to do. Now this could be based on the fact that you're mobile or you're trying to follow up from another attack. So let's try the dash attack standing still. So let me hold down the first side mouse button. Okay, I do the dash attack immediately, right? No problem. Let's try it again. Standing perfectly still. Okay, do the dash attack again. Now let's try to follow up with a regular combo. Jab, 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 guard, dash attack, guard, guard, leaping thrust, dash attack. Like, see, it gets a little weird, right? I don't find a reason to do that. I use Gunlance, so I'm more than well equipped to just hold down the guard and then press both of these for my Wyvern Fire. I don't see a difference in doing it for a dash attack. Obviously there's stuff in between, but again, the Gunlance has stuff in between that too, so there seems to be hardly any point in using the RT plus A for hammer. I think it would be a lot better if we just got rid of the R here and did the first side mouse button again. Get rid of the alt, obviously. So you hold the first side mouse button, and you don't have to worry about pressing the R key at all. There's a sort of connection you want to bring all together with all of these inputs and buttons, and for some reason the R being the charge button, whereas pretty much every other attack with the hammer being the mouse button seems to be a little weird. Like, why make 90% of it mouse oriented when you can just make 100% of it? I would say the hammer is pretty straightforward in this one. Just make these the keys and you should be all good. There's always a little bit of consistency when it comes to weapons that contain a shield of sorts. You hold the guard, and then they give you a couple basic attacks to do behind the shield. They might combo into something a little bit extra, but in terms of guard slash, this is all you get pretty much. What I did notice in the middle of making this is that I really didn't like the fact that F was one of the keys in order to fire the slinger. Since it doesn't interfere with the weapon controls for your focus mode to be the second side mouse button, I would recommend making the second side mouse button something like this, or maybe you could even swap the two, for example. Maybe you want the fire slinger ammo to be the second side mouse button, so it's just something as food for thought. R for guard on Greatsword is, make it the first side mouse button. Greatsword is very, it's straightforward, but also pretty complicated at the same time, and most of that comes from the positioning of monsters and your knowledge on their behavior, as well as just a lot of timing and placement. I would recommend messing with this one the most to personalize it as much as possible, because Greatsword is very hard to master in terms of just getting the most bang for your buck consistently. I would say for me personally, I always leave the guards with the first side mouse button for me. If you're the type who doesn't want as much confusion, leave the simultaneous actions blank as much as you can. If you think that they'll benefit you greatly and you're not afraid to just try it out a little bit in the training area, I recommend that too, because they could benefit you, as I've shown with previous weapons other than the Greatsword. For the sake of putting all the weapons in this video, as I'm already at 12 out of 14 of them, we could just talk about the Gunlance and the Charge Blade again, as I've mentioned in previous separate videos. Obviously, I make the guard first side mouse button. I don't really mess with anything else here, because I think that's actually pretty straightforward. And I think about it, I kind of like the second mouse button being the slinger, so I might have to go back and change all that. This is guard, you know, first side mouse button, you do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Similar to the Lance's charge ability, you hold guard, you press left and right click to do a powerful attack that does a lot of damage. No simultaneous action bind required. That one's pretty straightforward. I feel like a lot of people seen the videos on that one before this one, so I'll make that one a little brief, as well as the Charge Blade coming up right now. So very similar to the Gunlance, pretty much the same. I made the controls exactly the same. First side mouse button is guard, special attack. I think it makes more sense that holding right click is like charging in a sense. I think charging with the left click button as a main attack is a little bit weird. So the Greatsword feels like an outlier for that. I would much rather charge my shield using an elemental round slash than just holding my guard up. So that's exactly what I did achieve with this. I do a shield thrust to amp the elemental discharge, and then I press the first side mouse button to turn into a round slash in order to charge my shield. Just guard, press right click, and then left click to charge, let go. Simple as that. I feel like most people saw my other video on that, so there's not much to explain here that I already haven't explained in the other videos. So, yeah, that's it. See ya.